Throughout the history of storytelling, one of the toughest challenges for writers has been defining the fantasy genre. Some attribute fantasy to medieval settings, full of magic, monsters, and brave heroes who slay them. Others might have a more general approach, citing any story where the fictional world differs from our own in some meaningful way. No matter the perspective, most authors and filmmakers fail to capture the essence of fantasy. However, of the few that succeed, none do so more remarkably than Jim Henson with his 1986 film, Labyrinth. While at first glance this film seems to be a run-of-the-mill fairy tale story, featuring a young girl embarking on a quest to navigate a strange land and meeting eccentric characters along the way, viewers quickly realize Labyrinth is more than meets the eye. The film serves as a commentary on its genre, exploring fantasy's connection to childhood and playing into the subversions of expectations that fantasy is known for. In doing so, Henson encapsulates the concepts that lay at the heart of the fantasy genre, producing a film that perfectly describes what fantasy is all about. The clearest interpretation of Labyrinth is that of a coming-of-age story, with a young girl named Sarah, played by Jennifer Connelly, featured as the film's protagonist. Henson explores themes of childhood and responsibility. Sarah is introduced as an immature teenager, still obsessed with the stories she read as a kid as she dresses up in princess gowns and loses her temper when her favorite stuffed bear, Lancelot, is given to her baby brother Toby. After reciting a line from her favorite story, Labyrinth, Sarah inadvertently summons Jareth, the Goblin King, to take Toby away to his labyrinth. Her preceding adventure to rescue her brother teaches Sarah the importance of maturing, one example being Sarah's repeated use of the line,
"It's not fair!"
Sarah, like many children, is confronted with the truth that life is not fair and she can't expect everything to work out. Notably, it is only after Jareth questions her assertion that she begins to reflect on her attitude toward the situation.
You say that so often. I wonder what your basis for comparison is.
After which, she does not repeat the line. However, unlike most coming-of-age stories, Sarah does not simply accept life's unfairness and learn to live in an unjust world. Instead, she acknowledges this unfairness and challenges it further, beating the odds stacked against her by Jareth, who serves as the film's symbol of authority. In this way, Labyrinth differentiates itself from films such as The Wizard of Oz, which famously concludes with Dorothy accepting her place at home in Kansas and forgetting about her desires to live somewhere more wonderful. Instead, Henson allows Sarah to take a more realistic approach. By the end of the film, Sarah understands the need to face her problems instead of escaping into her fantasy stories, but also understands that these stories are her place of comfort, and she can still indulge in them as she grows up without relying on them. In doing so, Henson subverts the audience's expectations around the character development of female leads in fantasy films. This subversion of expectations is not just limited to Labyrinth's themes of maturity. As Sarah learns early on in her adventure, the preconceived notions of fantasy fans are not to be trusted in the Labyrinth. Before even entering the Labyrinth, Sarah is shocked to find out that fairies are mean-spirited pests instead of the kind spirits they are portrayed as in her stories. Sarah then attempts to apply rational thinking, as later she is faced with a riddle presented by two guards, each in front of a door that leads either to certain death or the path to the castle.
Then the other door leads to the castle and this door leads to certain death.
How do you know? He could be telling the truth.
But then you wouldn't be. So if you told me that he said yes, I know the answer is no.
But I could be telling the truth.
But then he would be lying. So if you told me that he said yes, I know the answer would still be no.
Despite solving the problem logically, Sarah is set back on her journey as the door leads to a hole that Sarah falls through, landing in an oubliette underground. Thus, both Sarah and the audience can't make sense of the Labyrinth, as neither fantasy tropes nor logical thinking are viable explanations. Instead, Sarah must learn to adapt to the Labyrinth's rules, or lack thereof. For example, soon after Sarah escapes the oubliette, she hears a monstrous roar.
Goodbye!
Instead of fleeing, as her dwarf companion Hoggle does, Sarah investigates and finds that the roar came from a troll being tormented by goblin soldiers. Rather than resorting to fairy tale tropes, which depict giant monsters as enemies to be slain, or real-world logic which would tell her to run away, Sarah saves the monster, named Ludo, and comes to find that he is really a gentle and friendly creature. Another example is found in Sarah's last companion, Sir Didymus, and his steed Ambrosius. Sir Didymus presents himself as a brave and mighty knight, but in actuality is fairly weak, and Ambrosius, who is an English sheepdog and not a horse, is cowardly. Like Sarah, the audience also must forget what they think they know about fantasy films, such as the scary monsters and strong knights, in order to properly understand Henson's message at the heart of the film. These subversions of both Sarah and the audience's expectations play a major role in Labyrinth's commentary on the fantasy genre. By flipping the genre on its head, Henson is able to critique fantasy tropes and show what really makes a story fantasy. For example, Jareth is often represented by a barn owl throughout the film. The appearance of the owl indicates Jareth is watching Sarah in the real world, as we see it observe her when she is dressed up and reciting the play at the beginning of the film. Furthermore, throughout the film, Jareth shows genuine concern for Sarah that is then undercut by his malicious actions, such as when he uses the enchanted peach to not only try to win her affection by putting her in a dreamlike trance, but also make her forget about her quest to save her brother. These conflicting behaviors come to a head at the film's climax, when Sarah has successfully made her way to the castle and searches for Toby. Jareth is present as Sarah chases after her brother, but makes no effort to stop her, even though he knows her time is almost up. Instead, Jareth sings a song about how he loves Sarah and believes in her as he watches her foil his plans. When he finally confronts her, Jareth rants to Sarah about how everything he has done throughout the events of the film was for her. He only took Toby at her request and was only ever frightening when she was afraid of him. In Jareth's own words, he is
Exhausted from living up to your expectations.
a line not only directed at Sarah, but also the viewer. Henson uses the peak of tension in the film to challenge the common perception of fantasy villains. Jareth is only evil because Sarah and the audience expect him to be, and as a fictional character, he can only be what he is perceived as, even when he could very well be more if they just changed their perspective. Henson crafted this scene to make the audience question their beliefs regarding the antagonists of fairy tales, much like he has made Sarah question her own beliefs about what a fairy tale, quote-unquote, should be. This commentary, along with the film's subversive story elements and coming-of-age narrative, is exactly what makes Labyrinth the perfect frame of reference for what makes a film fantasy. By presenting the audience with a story that appears to have been told time and time again, Henson allows assumptions to grow. He then takes these assumptions and breaks them by including elements the audience doesn't expect, like the kind monster Ludo or the weak knight Didymus. This allows Henson to make the audience question their previously held beliefs, expanding beyond only what a fantasy includes and into the real world, as with the film's ending. Once Sarah returns from the labyrinth to her home, the audience is led to believe that, like other coming-of-age films, the female lead will learn to move on from childish behaviors like playing pretend and reading fairy tales, and grow into a responsible adult. In Labyrinth, however, this is not the case. Sarah does become responsible, but reveals that she still needs her fantasies and the characters she grew up with, though she understands that she can't rely on them to escape from her life's problems.
I need you, Huggle.
You do?
I don't know why, but every now and again in my life, for no reason at all, I need you.
This ending shows that not only should fantasy stories subvert the audience's expectations, allowing them to reflect on their own beliefs and assumptions, but also use this reflection to show the importance of fantasy's impact on real life, inspiring the audience to be more hopeful and not ignore the child within them. Or, in the words of the film's tagline, a good fantasy is one where everything seems possible and nothing is what it seems.